Good evening, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. My name is Nilanjan Sarkar. I am Deputy Director of the LSE South Asia Centre here at the London School of Economics. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this afternoon's event, which is the last event in this term, because as all of you know, we are closing on Thursday for Easter, and for those of you online, that's news as well. We will of course be back with another complete schedule of events for the summer term later on at the very end of April and in early May. Before I make the basic points about the event as well as the introductions, which I'm very much looking forward to doing, I just wanted to say for those of you who are fasting, we are going to take a break at 6:26 for about 5 minutes, so that all of you who need to can break your fast, which this evening is at 6:28 p.m. and I have my clock set to 6:28, so I will announce when it is 6:28. So we will take that break just so that all of you know. The event today is, of course, on the recently concluded elections in Pakistan, which happened on the 8th of February. And since then, the results have been declared and the new government is in place. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that the results have been the topic of some conversation. And as a result, we decided that we would do an event, and looking at it whichever way we are where we are, a government is in place and the government has started functioning. So what we thought we would do is that we would use the event and the consequent declaration of results as the starting point for a conversation looking ahead at what the future looks like for democratic processes in Pakistan in light of what has happened. Where does one go from here? How does one go about it? And so on and so forth. And those we have invited to speak are very, very well equipped to talk precisely about this. This is captured in the title of the event this evening, which is Pakistan Elections 2024, Negotiating the Impact on Pakistan's Democracy. So what we want this event to be, is a forward-looking event which will help us to look into the future rather than just remain within what has happened in the last month and a little over that month. Before I stop for the break, I do want to, and to introduce the speakers, I do want to say a very, very big thank you to my colleague, Dr. Zahid Mumtaz, who is sitting just behind me. It is entirely to his credit that we are able to put this event together, and we that is the LSE South Asia Centre, are delighted to be doing this event in collaboration with the Department for Social Policy, where I is a fellow. And we would not have been able, the centre would not have been able to bring this together with our very limited resources. So I'm very grateful to Zahid, as well as to the personnel in their office, especially Maria Schlegel. Now, we still have 3 minutes, so I will go ahead and welcome all our members of our audience, all of you sitting over here. Thank you very much for coming, especially in this weather. A very big welcome also to those of you who are joining us from across various time zones. I do know, I'm very, very aware that it is very late in the night in Pakistan now. It is not even evening. So thank you very much to all of you who are joining us from there. And we are very encouraged by the response that we've had to this event and the interest thereof in all of it. The event, as you can see, is happening in hybrid fashion. So some of us, the speakers, are present here at LSE, and we have one speaker who has joined us via Zoom and is currently in Pakistan, in Lahore. We likewise also have an audience over here, as well as an audience online. And everyone should know that this event is being recorded and will be edited and will be made available in due course. So just so that you know that, yeah. Those of you who are joining us online should know that you are very welcome to ask questions, and the questions will follow. One of the very good things, and perhaps the only good thing that has ever come out of the pandemic, is that a lot of us have become very technologically savvy. And a lot of things no longer need to be said, but I will still say it, which is that you can ask questions on Zoom, and then you can also vote for questions on Zoom. This is only for those of you who are doing this online. And we will ask the questions that get the maximum votes, but we'll also ask questions otherwise. We will alternate between the audience that is present over here and the audience online in asking questions. And it would be great if you can say your name and your affiliation before you ask a question, just so that we know who you are. It is also my duty to inform you that in keeping with LSE regulations, this is especially true for members of the audience who are online, it is not essential for you to say your name or your affiliation. You are welcome to remain anonymous and simply pose a question. Please keep your questions direct and relevant to the discussion this afternoon. It is now 6:26. We'll take a break for 5 minutes and we will come back at 6:31. The way we're going to do this for the benefit of the audience is that we've had a chat beforehand about the order in which we're going to speak. And we have asked both our speakers to speak for approximately 10 minutes. This is as much so that we have enough time to have a proper discussion later on, in which I'm sure other questions and other issues will come up. Also because, please bear in mind, it is very, very late in Pakistan at the moment, and Salman is in Pakistan, and I'm very conscious of it. So it is now my very pleasant duty to introduce the speakers, and the order in which I introduce them is the order in which they will speak, and we will take questions after that. And I will once again explain how the Q&A session will work before we come to the questions. Our first speaker is Mr. Salman Akram Raja. He's a prominent lawyer. I say lawyer within quotes because that is quite simply what his Twitter bio is. It says a lawyer. Salman is advocate in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, is a prominent practicing constitutional lawyer, and I use the word constitutional very consciously over here. In the recent elections, Salman stood as a candidate for the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, from Lahore's NA 128 constituency. He contested the official results as declared, and in light of widespread allegations of tampering of official results, has asked for a special judicial commission to scrutinize the declared results. Salman will speak for about 10 minutes, after which I will invite Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, who is sitting here to my left. Aisha is currently Senior Fellow at the Department of War Studies at King's College London and author most prominently of Military Inc., Inside Pakistan's Military Economy, which was published in 2007 first, and then a revised edition was published in 2016. Aisha is currently working on another book manuscript, about which she'll tell you only if she feels like it. Once the two of them have spoken, Dr. Zahid Mumtaz, who is sitting to my right, is fellow in the Department of Social Policy here at the London School of Economics, is the brain behind this event this evening, and Zahid's research and academic interests are in international social and public policy, with a particular focus on Pakistan. Everyone, welcome. Salman, please speak now. 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarkar. Well, the election that has just happened, I think, is very significant in the sense that one view of it, and that's the view I take, is that it's really signaled the end of democracy in Pakistan. What happened between the night of the 8th and the 9th of February was a wholesale assault on the election. Results were completely rewritten during the night. And leads of up to 100,000 in my case, the lead was 95,000, were just extinguished, as if it were. Completely fake results were scripted, and then since then the ballot bags have been stuffed. So what comes out of this is, if this exercise is allowed to go unchecked, and if it succeeds, then all future elections will happen in the same manner. So that's the stark reality of it. And if this happens, then there's no point in anybody contesting an election going forward. So it seems that there was a script that gave a certain number of seats to the different parties, and that exact number was allowed, and nothing more. And that's resulted in a coalition government, which is in essence a continuation of the government that existed till August of last year, when that government was disbanded and a caretaker setup was put in place in order to have the elections. And that caretaker setup went beyond its constitutional limit. But finally, we had these elections on the 8th of February. Now, the elections themselves, the day of the 8th of February was historic, was fabulous. Now, I was right there in the middle of it all. There were 433 polling stations in my constituency. And I went, from one to the other. The passion with which people had come out, these were often illiterate people who were struggling, with the symbols. Now, remember, the PTI had been denied its symbol, the bat, with which it's been associated for the last 27 years. This time around, what happened was that if in a constituency, a National Assembly constituency, such as mine, the candidate for the National Assembly had a different symbol from the PTI candidate contesting for the provincial seat in the same constituency. So I had 5 provincial candidates contesting for provincial assembly seats in NA 128 under me, and I had a different symbol and they had different symbols. So the idea was that the voter would not know who the PTI candidate was. And yet, what happened on the 8th of February, to our utter surprise, was that people turned up, illiterate women turned up, with our symbols painted on their hands, on their cheeks, and they knew exactly who to vote for. So the denial of the symbol in the end did not really hamper, the voting for the PTI. So what happened during the day of the 8th of February was really an avalanche. It was the single biggest wave, I would say, in the history of Pakistan. From in the Attock district in the Punjab, which is the largest province of Pakistan, right down to Rahim Yar Khan and Bahawal Nagar, there was a landslide. The PMLN, the supposed rival of the PTI in the Punjab, won nothing till you come to Lahore, where they won 3 seats legitimately. Ultimately, they were given 11 or 12 seats, but their legitimate count was 3. But nothing in the northernmost Attock district, nothing in Rawalpindi, nothing in Chakwal, nothing in Faisalabad, nothing in Gujranwala. Nothing like this has happened ever before in the history of Pakistan. You go down to Jhang, they get nothing. You go to Dera Ghazi Khan, the local landed elite, somebody like Awais Lagari, got thrashed and then was fraudulently made to win. So everybody knows what happened in Bahawal Nagar. The dictator Ziaul Haq's son, Ijazul Haq, was number 5 and was then again made to win, declared number 1. And everybody all across those constituencies and the country knows what happened. And the reason for that, funnily, was technology. Now, this was the first election in which what is called a Form 45, which is the result of the voting at each polling station, became available to the polling agents of the different candidates. And this is because of the frauds in the past. We had instructed our polling agents to not leave the polling station without this Form 45. So all of us have the Form 45 that was issued at the end of polling on the 8th of February, and that gives us a result. Now, what the Election Commission has done, after a delay of 1 month, they have uploaded their version of the Forms 45. And when you put the two together, it's ludicrous. You see the cuttings, the crossings, 43 votes becoming 1443. The turnout in some polling stations goes to 100% or even more than 100%, because you can see the fake votes that have been added in those polling stations. So it's a wholesale assault on the electoral process, which is now very nicely documented in these 2 alternative versions of the results of the poll that we have, the candidates have, and that the Election Commission has now uploaded on its website. Anybody can go to the Election Commission website and go through these forms, and you'll see the scribblings, the cuttings, the overwritings, which really tell you what actually happened during that night. So my worry is that if this goes unchecked, if the judiciary, caves in, because now the matter will go to the courts. There is an election law under which we can take these matters to what are called election tribunals, and election tribunals have high court judges presiding. Now, if these election tribunals look the other way and let this theft happen, then that is the end of democracy. Every future election will be managed in the same manner. So that's a very serious situation. But having said that, today, funnily, the last 3 hours have seen the single biggest, I would say, earthquake in Pakistani politics, but more importantly, the judicial system of Pakistan in many a decade. 6 out of 8 judges of the Islamabad High Court have jointly written a letter to the Chief Justice of Pakistan in which they have given details of instances in which they were individually pressurized by the ISI, personnel of the ISI, to decide cases a certain way. Now, this is simply remarkable. Nothing like this has ever happened before. 6 out of 8 judges have accused their own Chief Justice of being complicit with the ISI, of not doing anything when they've complained to him, of in fact pressurizing them to go along with what was being demanded. So they've come out and they've laid the whole thing before the Chief Justice of Pakistan and before the people of Pakistan. They're saying, look, we are High Court judges. We are trying to do things according to the law, but we are not being allowed to do that. We are being pressurized. We are being threatened. We are being, told of dire consequences in the event of our not complying. So they've put it all down in black and white, and they've referred to specific cases, including cases in which Mr. Imran Khan was being prosecuted. So they've expressly said that in cases involving Mr. Imran Khan, they were directed to decide those cases a certain way. And one case in particular, they mentioned, in which 2 of the judges who've signed this letter say that while the Chief Justice wanted the case decided a certain way, in accordance with the directions coming from the intelligence agency, these 2 judges claim that they decided it the other way. And I know that because in that case, I was the counsel for Mr. Imran Khan. So I know what happened exactly in that case. And these judges have now given us the backstory. They've put it out today. And now I think we're in a new world. The intelligence agency has promptly denied it. The journalists who are supposed to be close to the intelligence agency have tried to impugn the integrity of these 6 judges, have called them liars, but this will not wash. 6 out of 8 judges of a high court signing a letter like this is just not something you can brush under the carpet. So this will have consequences. But the consequences will depend in large measure on how the generality of the journalists in the country, the academia, and the civil society at large respond to this moment. What we've seen over the last 1 year is that there have been excesses. After the 9th of May, when there was an incident or a set of incidents that involved protests and allegedly attacks on army residences and other official buildings, a campaign was launched to essentially crush the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Thousands of workers were picked up, were put in jail, often without charge. Hundreds and hundreds of women were picked up, who were not granted bail by the courts for 8, 9, 10 months. And the expectation was that this expression of brutality, there's no other word to describe, would crush the party. And yet on the 8th of February, we see the silent PTI voter came out and voted in big numbers. But they voted not only against the oppression, but they also voted against the silence, if you like, of civil society at large. What we saw during this period was that while women were being picked up left, right, and center, homes were being broken into in the middle of the night, people were being tortured, thrashed, families were being harassed, the civil society, the smart civil society, if you like, the general suspects regarding human rights defense, went largely mum. So there was a strange silence that descended on the country. You look at some of your best known op-ed writers in the English language press, they will all kind of turn around and say, but these guys are, cultists, lunatics, they're somehow a mob that needed to be corrected through force and so on. So look at somebody like Nadeem Farooq Paracha, who's written a whole book on the followers of Imran Khan, describing them as deluded mad people, cultists of some sort. His recent article a couple of weeks ago talks about the dark side of democracy and why democracy can't be allowed to, get out of hand. So there's been a very strange, if you like, compact between the, English-speaking, English op-ed writing, smart, supposedly liberal classes of Pakistan and the authoritarianism, the oppression that we've seen not just since the 9th of May, but even before that, the constitution was being trampled over with impunity. The constitution says that once an assembly is dissolved, elections must be held within 90 days. The 2 provincial assemblies of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Punjab were dissolved in January, and yet no elections took place till the 8th of February of the ensuing year. So from January 2023 till February 2024, We did not have elections. And after the expiry of the 90-day period, we lived through a period of constitutional disobedience. And yet the bulk of our civil society was okay about it. We've had military trials, military court trials of civilians who were arrested after the 9th of May. And yet we see only 3 petitions were filed in the Supreme Court challenging these trials. The bulk of our smart civil society again looked the other way. Now, this was a violation as blatant as is possible of the principles of due process that our constitution, at least pays lip service to. But in practice, we see what's happened. So there's been a wholesale trampling over of the constitutional process, of constitutional limits, with very little resistance. And that is why the vote of the 8th of February was hugely important. The people responded to all of this in the only way that they could, and that was through the power of the vote. It was a historic moment. It was really a heartwarming moment, but then the response was disgraceful. And we are now fighting that response. How do we overcome what happened during the night between the 8th and the 9th of February? And in that process, in that context, the stand taken today by 6 out of the 8 judges of the Islamabad High Court who accused their own Chief Justice in the High Court, as well as others outside the High Court, the security agencies, of interference, and have placed the matter before the Chief Justice of Pakistan, have really appealed, I would say, to the conscience of the entire nation. They want to be rescued, and they want to rescue the entire constitutional process. Now, will this rescue come to something? Will depend on what we do. So many of us are going to hold seminars. We are going to march on the streets. We are going to protest. We are going to do rallies in support of these judges. So I think this is a huge political moment when we all have to get out of our comfort zones. And I mean, I've been doing that regularly. I've been arrested twice in the last 2 weeks for exercising the right to protest, for walking on the roads, for leading rallies. And this is something we will carry on doing, because I think this is a now or never moment. If we do not do that, if we do not get out of our studies and ivory towers and so on, we are going to let this moment go away. And that is not something many of us are willing to allow. I think this is a once in a lifetime moment when we must come out and be counted. So that is where we are. That is, I would say, the basic fact scenario. And I'm here to answer questions and take things forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Salman. I should say, for the benefit of those of you who may not know, that Salman had also very kindly participated in our Pakistan at 75 event, which we did at LUMS in November 2022, but that was a panel on law. So it's really good to have you back with us. As chair, Salman, it is not in my gift to ask you questions. That is not something I can do, but I am going to raise 3 points. One of which is to give you a chance to clarify something that you have said, which I think requires a bit of clarification. Please bear in mind that not all members of the audience are from Pakistan or are necessarily aware of various details about Pakistan. But the 2 points I just wanted to raise that are out of curiosity, these are not, these are literally points of curiosity. One is, because the symbols were taken away from the PTI, and then all candidates who contested the elections as independent candidates had their own symbols. Let's take your example, whatever symbol you had, how did you, in the given amount of time, popularize and publicize it enough so that people were able to associate the symbol with you?
Yeah. I mean, we had to take the symbol out to the people. We used banners, posters, flexes. I had 300,000 telephone numbers that I managed to make phone calls to. So we did recorded phone calls. We used courier companies. We used people on foot, hundreds of people on foot to take our symbol to a household. So it was a massive operation. So our single biggest hurdle was taking our symbol to the electorate, to the voters. And that denial of symbol, I would say, was part of a larger plan or strategy against our party. But we overcame that. Every night, our banners, our posters would be taken down by government agencies. Official vehicles would come and they would tear down our posters and banners. Our workers, putting these posters and banners up, would get arrested, would get taken away without charge. Then we would go and try and get them released. So it was a nightmare, going through this election campaign.
So.
And yet we did it. So we were in police stations, we were rescuing people who were arrested, who were beaten up, and these people would be right up again the next day, and they would go and they would put up these posters again for them to be taken down again that evening, and we would do it yet again the next day. So we've gone through all of that. And there is, I would say now, a body of people in Pakistan who've faced the worst that could have been thrown at us, and who are resolute about having their voice heard, about having their vote counted, and about democracy. I don't remember any point in time when the idea of democracy was as firmly embedded in the public mind as it is today.
Yeah, I'm just going to come to that. That's what I was going to say. But before that, just literally in one sentence, for the benefit of some members of the audience over here, can you just explain what the difference between a P45 and a P47? I mean, I know it, but...
Okay, now the Form 45 relates to every single polling station. So if there were 433 polling stations in my constituency, every polling station would have a Form 45, which gives the total number of votes polled for each candidate. So if there were 10 candidates, you'd have 10 different counts on that Form 45. The Form 47 then is the aggregate of all 433 polling stations, and that gives you the overall result then.
Thank you. Now, you are a lawyer, so you certainly do not require caution because you're very aware of the implications of what you say. But I am going to give you one chance to explain what you said towards the beginning of when you started to speak. You said that on the night of the 8th and the 9th, whatever happened, this is of February, whatever happened, it would seem, and I quote your words, that there was a script to how many seats were to be given to which party. You use the word script to suggest that government officials in charge of declaring results are acting to a predetermined script or an order or an idea. This is a very, very important and consequential thing to say, and borders on accusation. I just want to give you one chance to explain yourself.
Oh, absolutely. You see, and we're saying this in court. I'm filing a petition in a couple of days in court, as are many others, and we're going to say that the election was assaulted, and it was clear that my constituency was one of the constituencies that was not to be given to the PTI. I was not to be allowed to enter parliament for whatever reason. So there was clearly a plan already in place to assault the result in this constituency. And that was the case with a large number of other constituencies as well. Now, who all were involved in this plan, I'm not going there in any great detail. One has an idea, of course. But the fact of the matter is that there was a plan, and that plan was executed. That much is very clear.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to invite Dr. Aisha Siddiqa, who's currently Senior Fellow at the Department of War Studies in King's College London, and author most prominently of Military Inc. Inside Pakistan's Military Economy, which was published in 2007 with a revised edition in 2016. Aisha, please speak now. You have about 10 minutes.
Thank you. I have some slides as well.
Yeah.
Basically, that's for the benefit of those who are not familiar with the results of the elections. There is nothing that I would debate Salman. I mean, he's right about the pathetic state of democracy in Pakistan. Right? Very sad moment. However, I would say that after 1970, another such moment was 1970. 1970, when the strong military of Pakistan could not predict what the people wanted and went against them. And the results were totally opposite of what they had expected. The same thing has happened now. And yes, what we're looking at the moment is a moment of confrontation. It's a subdued confrontation, I would say, between the military and PTI supporters. Why the subdued confrontation? I think there are a couple of points which I'd like to raise here. One is that PTI, with all its support, could never manage, has never managed a Tahrir Square kind of public gathering. And why I mentioned Tahrir Square, that's the gathering in Egypt in 2011, is that unless you raise the cost for the military of pushing democracy in a certain direction, they will not really get impressed. And numbers, the number of people out on the streets is essential. So the people who came out to protest on May 9th, I think they achieved one big step, a major step. That they decided to come out, protest in front of military buildings, and raised a lot of slogans. Yet they could then be pushed back because the numbers weren't sufficient. And unfortunately, through 2018, before 2018, 2016, 17, 18, when Imran Khan began his journey, to power, he's had a lot of public sympathy with him, but not the numbers that would come out. And that numbers are essential if you want to turn Pakistan's democracy somewhat. Of course, the judges, 6 judges was writing a letter it's very interesting. It's something which is worth noting. It also indicates one thing, that not everything is right in the state of Pakistan. I mean, especially in terms of, the establishment. It's not the establishment, it's powerful, yet it's not entirely in control. This is a support. I mean, interesting, what makes it also interesting is when you do the historical comparison. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto did not get that kind of support from the judiciary, which Imran Khan has been getting from the judiciary. He's not been getting Zulfikar Ali Bhutto when he was thrown out of power, despite being one example of a populist prime minister. The second one, populist prime minister, is Imran Khan. And the difference is that in case of Bhutto, the middle class, the urban middle class, did not support him in the manner that Imran is getting support. So the question which I'll basically try to address is what's happening inside the military, and what is the challenge as far as people are concerned. I mean, Salman Akram Raja is very hopeful. He wants to, talk to people. He wants to have jalsas. He wants to have corner meetings and educate people, and of course, politically excite them. But is that, effort towards generating political excitement? Because what we are definitely looking at then is confrontation. I mean, as a political scientist, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, that confrontation at some point in our history has to happen. But will that confrontation happen? There is a very bad state of economy, which puts pressure on people. Will the people come out? And what I see is that in the coming months, as Pakistan, the new government, signs a deal with the IMF, and the tax burden increases, the cost of living prices intensifies. There will be protests. There will be some organic protests. Would PTI have that capacity, the leadership, to actually capture that? So, that is one question, but I'll come to that after these slides. The other thing which very quickly I wanted to raise as well.
Your slides are not moving.
Yeah, no, I know.
Oh, okay.
I will. The other thing I think which is important to understand is that, yes, there is this sharp polarization, which is important to understand. And this polarization started much earlier. Salman talked about it. I mean, he talked about, the liberal, educated elite of Pakistan siding with the authoritarian, authoritarianism in the country. But the problem is that that polarization started also because Imran Khan, kind of polarized, pushed people away. I mean, there was this fear. I mean, there has been attacks on media, on journalists during his tenure. So, it's not all black and white, but what is definitely black and white is polarization. So what I thought I would quickly do is go, kind of go through these results and see that what these results tell us. PTI is just one part of the story. The other part that I thought I'd also point out is that what happened to, for example, performance of religious parties in these elections. I mean, that was also something very interesting. If you go through this slide and the next one, you will see, and the names of religious parties are in bold. There were about 15 religious parties. Some of them made it to the parliament, but very few. And in fact, the TLP, Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, got 2.9 million votes. Jamaat-e-Islami got 1.3 million. JUIF got 2.1 million votes, but very few seats. So one thing for sure, and this is something which has happened in 2018 elections and 2024 elections as well, is that religious parties find it very difficult to translate the support that they have, the street support in parliamentary seats. But what has happened in 2024 is even more interesting. That a lot of their constituents, their voters, their support base has actually gone towards PTI. PTI has been critical in taking away those seats. I mean, KP, for instance, JUIF did not perform well. JUIF, Jamaat-e-Ulama-e-Islam, Fazlur Rahman, has been doing very well in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but they could not do well, primarily because of PTI. But the other factor which I think we should not ignore is also support from the Taliban to PTI. That is something which doesn't get mentioned. Taliban was sending letters. Taliban were, sending letters of support for PTI candidates. The other thing, if you move on to the next slides, this is, I thought this is interesting. This is the average of every province. In Punjab scored the highest in terms of the turnout rate, followed by I think Sindh, Balochistan, and KP had the least voter turnout. But if you move on, I think the other thing which is very interesting, the next one, what has come out very, something very peculiar, which is going to have an impact on Pakistan's future, is regionalization of politics. I mean, if you look at the results, you have PPP dominating Sindh, followed by the next slide, please. So you have PPP in Sindh, you have PTI in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And now, what is very interesting is a couple of things which I would like to raise here. One is that this regionalization of politics is not something which just is peculiar to 2024 elections. This has happened because of two things. One, the military, way back in 2007 and 2008, wanted Pakistan's politics to take a direction where political parties got regionalized. So if you actually look at a map of Pakistan's political parties, today there is hardly any national party. They're all regional parties. The other thing which is very important is, and that is, this regionalization has also come out of something very organic, which is a result of 18th Amendment. Now, what 18th Amendment did, politically, it benefited political parties that were in power in in particular provinces. So actually, unless a military throws you out, throws the party out, there is no anti-incumbency. So in KP, PTI has continued to survive, to thrive there. And of course, one of the reasons for that was the policies they had. For example, the health card. I mean, the health card has really benefited them, but without looking at the cost of the service which was being provided. I mean, I've spoken to experts and economists, and the problem is that it was generating a financial burden which ultimately the state could not bear. I mean, that was something which was being paid for. I mean, it's ideal. It's almost like NHS in the UK. I mean, it feels lovely, and we all say that, you know, NHS must survive in the UK. The same thing goes for the health card, except for Pakistan, it does not have the finances to bear the burden, but it definitely benefited. The same way in Sindh, Pakistan People's Party has benefited from, you know, the Benazir Income Support Program, hugely benefited from it. And the other thing which has benefited the People's Party in Sindh is the patronage system, which has been strengthened because of the 18th Amendment. So it's patronage provided by the People's Party, the contracts, the opportunities, the jobs, etc., which has made them. Now, the only province where you actually, the two provinces which in this election are very interesting. One is Punjab, of course, where the battle was, where the military wanted to get the PTI out, but it also wanted to get PMLN partly in, but partly out. You know, when they say that the intention was to for PMLN to win entirely, I don't think the intention was to give them the kind of majority which would then make it difficult for the military to control this highly important province. It's very critical politically, you know, for the military. The other province which is interesting is Balochistan. I mean, Balochistan, when I'm giving a presentation on Pakistani elections, I don't even want to mention Balochistan. Reason being that Balochistan forever has suffered from this sheer authoritarianism, where it's not political parties, but actually mafia groups which tend to win. I mean, it's a tragedy which now is being in some ways exported to Punjab and rest of Pakistan. So what people in Balochistan want, what kind of people, you know, in 2018, they created Baap Party, Balochistan. So they created that party and was made to win. Now it's been divided between PMLN, PPP, and finally, you know, PPP made to win. So the problem with, yeah, all right, just couple of minutes, actually. You know, the problem with this regionalization, with this division, is that what does it say about people's ability to push back the military? And the interesting part with these elections is that the divide is both vertical and horizontal. I mean, PTI, I would argue, did not just get support, you know, the ordinary voters by the ordinary voters. It has support base in the military as well. And there is that anxiety which is very much present there. Now, the question is, you have the echelons which do not want PTI to return to power. And this is where we stand at the moment. The question then is, will the PTI leadership be able to create that challenge, which then raises the cost for the military? And right now, I don't think that seems to be the situation. I mean, Imran Khan, they're trying to negotiate with him, but they would like to keep him in. They would like to keep the PTI out at least till 2018, when the army chief, you know, it's his turn to get an extension. it's most likely that he will get an extension. They just gave the air chief an extension, as an experiment, I would argue. Now, will it, and the question then is that will it generate turbulence within the army to the extent that there is a problem, that there is a chaos within, which then finally brings a change? I would argue, if not the next 2-3 years, maybe in the next 5 years. Next 5 years, Pakistan is going to remain highly turbulent. I'll stop.
Okay, thank you very much. Salman, I'm going to give you a chance before we take on the Q&A, if you'd like to come back on some of the things that Aisha has said, especially with regards to the PTI. But before that, and before I invite Zahid to make his point, to make his presentation, I just want to explain how the Q&A system will work, both for those of you who are present here, as well as those of you watching online. You're welcome to ask a question to a particular speaker. You're equally welcome to pose a question to the entire panel if it's a general question. For those online, you can vote for questions. So someone may have asked a question and you want to ask the same question, so you can literally vote for it. And the more number of votes a question gets, it goes up the ladder. And we try and take on as many of them as possible. So please start thinking or typing out your questions. I will now invite Dr. Zahid Mumtaz, who is fellow in the Department of Social Policy here at the London School of Economics, to make his presentation. Zahid has the unenviable position of being the discussant here, not a speaker. So let's see what he's got to say. Zahid's research and academic interests are in international social and public policy, with a particular focus on Pakistan. Zahid, please speak now, and you have about 10 minutes.
Thanks, thanks, Arshad. Thanks, Salman. I'll be talking about 3 major themes, and Aisha and Salman has discussed in detail about Pakistan, but I'll be discussing something more at the abstract and theoretical level and how that relates to what is going on in Pakistan. So I'll discuss 3 themes. The first is on the nature of social contract, which the Pakistani state has with its citizens. The second one is about this kind of rights which citizens of Pakistan enjoy. And ultimately, the third theme is tied to the first 2 themes, is the implications for democracy, that in the presence of a different kind of social contract, in the absence of social rights or economic or political rights, will there be any prospects for democracy in Pakistan? So I'll start my discussion by referring to Charles Mills. He was a famous, late Charles Mills. He was a famous critical race scholar in US. And he wrote a lot about the contract, the nature of social contract that exists between a state and its citizens. Charles Mills basically challenged the idea of a social contract, which was the basis of any democratic setup. So he argued that the kind of the contract that exists between a state and its citizens is not the ideal contract. So the ideal contract states that people give up their rights to a sovereign in essence rule those people and give certain kind of welfare benefits, so on and so forth. But what Charles Mills argued was that there exists an unequal relation between the state and its citizens. Now, his argument was coming from the people of color in United States. He was referring to the example of slave trade in US, where the people were, the black people of color in the United States were dominated by the state. Their rights were subversived. So he argued that there exists an asymmetrical and hierarchical relationship between states and its citizens. Now, I would take this idea of the domination contract and try to apply it to the context of Pakistan. You have heard Salman, you have heard Aisha. And I'd like you to think about it, that the nature of relationship or the nature of contract that exists between the state and the citizens. When I say state, I do not refer to the military only. I refer to all the state institutions, whether it's judiciary, it's the bureaucracy, military, police, etc., or the election commission. The role of the state here in Pakistan, or any case, is to uphold that social contract, right? And one of the mechanisms through which that social contract is established is elections. Now, an election where the whole process is undermined, where the whole process is in question, can that social contract be established? So that's the starting point I'd like to begin my discussion with. So in Pakistan's case, if the whole process is undermined, it's dubious. There is fingers pointed towards the whole process. There is international media who was talking about the credibility of the elections. Can a viable social contract can exist between the states and Pakistani citizens? Now, this relates to the second point, is the idea of rights. Now, we have got a state or a relationship between a state and the citizens that is unequal, that is hierarchical, right? Where state is subverting or dominating its citizens. So can such state will guarantee any forms of rights to its citizens? So take example of Pakistan, where there exists an asymmetrical relationship between the state and the citizens. Can that state guarantee any form of rights to its citizens? And this example which Salman was referring to, the judiciary, the 6 judges writing to the Supreme Court that the intelligence agencies were interfering in the decision making, is a good example to understand that judiciary is basically one of the institutions that upholds social rights or any forms of right in any democratic setup. So in a country where judiciary is writing that their decisions are being interfered with, can those such rights be established or determined by the Supreme Court, by any court in the country for its citizens? Right? So it's really important to understand that the institutions which are there to protect people or to guarantee people's social rights or any other forms of rights, whether civil, economic, or political, if they are not doing their job properly, or the state is not doing its job properly, how can they protect people's rights? So this brings my point to the third point of my discussion, is the implications for democracy. So we have got a scenario at the moment in Pakistan where there's a social contract which is not ideal. We have got state institutions that cannot protect people's rights. So what could be the situation of democracy in that particular circumstances? Can there be a democracy in such a scenario? And one of the prominent examples of that is the civilians who are being tried in the military courts. Now, according to the Constitution, no civilian can be tried in the military courts. But here, what we are witnessing in Pakistan's case is civilians being tried into the military courts, and there is a likelihood. Now, the case of civilian trials in the military courts is currently undergoing in Pakistan, but there is a likelihood, there is a chance that even the Supreme Court may uphold that decision that yes, the civilians can be tried in the military. But there is a chance, there's a likelihood, because the news are coming like that Supreme Court may allow civilians to be tried in the military courts. So what I'm trying to argue here is that we are looking at a situation in which we have got a contract which is unequal. We have got state institutions that cannot protect people's rights, rather they undermine people's rights. And ultimately, we've got a country in which we have got a government which is not representing the will of the people. And this has been continuing in Pakistan's case since 1947 onwards. Now, Pakistan has seen various forms of government, starting from dictatorships to hybrid democracies, and more recently, according to economists, Pakistan has drifted back into an authoritarian regime at the moment. Right? So, in the presence of this whole setup, it's unlikely that Pakistan can move onto the path of democracy. Now, the other question which arises here is that what West can do about it, how Western countries can do anything about it. My question would simply be is that any person from the Western country would like to live in such a situation, would like to live in a situation where their rights are undermined, their contract, the social contract which they have with the state is denied of. Can any person in the Western world would like to live in such situation? If the answer is yes, the Western countries can have good relations. If the answer is no, they could think and rethink what they need to do. But here I'll stop because we can take questions and answers from here.
Sure, thank you very much. We're going to take questions now, but before that, Salman, just in case you wanted to come back to any particular point that Aisha made, especially about the PTI? You don't have to, but just in case you want to, I want to give you a chance. If you will, please be very brief.
Yeah, thank you. I will. Uh, I just want to make a comment about what Aisha said about all parties in Pakistan having become regional parties. Now, yes, that's true if you look at the electoral results. But our position, of course, from within the PTI is that we, in fact, won seats all across the country. And in particular, we won seats in the city of Karachi. Our position is that we won 19 seats in the city of Karachi, and they were all taken away from us. And that the MQM, which is a party that was propped up during the 1980s and then through the 90s and so on, and the Musharraf years, in fact had won nothing. They were given 17 seats out of the blue by simply changing results. So if you allowed us the actual number of seats that we had in Karachi, which is in the Sindh province, then we clearly had seats in, not just Punjab and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, but also in Karachi in the province of Sindh. And our position is that we had at least 2 seats, National Assembly seats in Balochistan as well. So what is happening is that there is, because of this script that I allude to, a deliberate attempt to confine parties to a narrower base than what they in fact would have if they were allowed to function freely. So what's happened because of this interference is that political parties have not been allowed to mature and grow organically. They've been cut down deliberately and turned into regional parties. Something like this happened to the People's Party, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So what happened to the People's Party, it being cut down to being the Sindh Party, is something that is being attempted with the PTI today as well. Now, the other comment about Taliban having supported the PTI was a very strange comment. And I can assure you that the people of Pakistan do not take their voting cues from the Taliban. The Taliban have no political standing in Pakistan. They could have coerced people through violence, but not through writing of letters. If people have voted for the PTI, they voted because they wanted to and not because the Taliban asked them to do so. So that's, by the way, comment. And yes, Aisha is right that people have not so far come out in the numbers that would cause, the kind of, if you like, tectonic shift in the power relations between the authorities and the people. Now, why that has not happened is something to think about. There's been brutality. There's been a wholesale, if you like, decapitation of the leadership of the PTI. Mr. Imran Khan has been in jail since May. And one case after another, he's facing 200 trials, nothing less than that. So there has been a deliberate attempt to deal with the people through fear, coercion, and a kind of brutality that the PTI voter had not expected. You need to understand that the PTI is a large tent. It's not just a middle-class party. It's not just an urban party. It's not just a Pakhtun party or a Punjabi party. It has support now, as is clear from the last election results, tampered with though they were. It has support in the rural areas, in Jhang, in Bahawalnagar, in Rahim Yar Khan. So it's a party which has a diverse set of people supporting it. And for these people to come together in a single movement that can cause a shift on the roads, I think is something, that is possible. But I would agree with Aisha that I don't see it happening in the immediate future, but, it's simmering out there. And that simmering can turn into something more at any point in time, whether it's the economy that takes its toll on people's livelihoods or something else. And the absence of the social contract that Zayed talks about is becoming ever more evident. And the sad part is that increasingly we hear learned, if you like, quote unquote, discourse against democracy in Pakistan. People are now increasingly talking about how well China has done and why democracy is such a dispensable thing. Why should we even really care about democracy? I have a conversation like that with, some Western educated PhD almost every day. So you can see that kind of thinking, both sponsored and maybe genuinely, held, becoming fairly widespread in Pakistan as we kind of balance things between the West, the US and China, we are not clear where Pakistan is headed in terms of that, balancing act. And it's having an impact on thinking within Pakistan as well. The China model, the Egypt model are talked about more frequently than I would, want them talked about. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have about 20-ish minutes and we have a few questions. But before that, Aisha, I'm going to give you a chance if you want to say something in response to Salman, but you don't have to.
No, I just wanted to point out, for just 10 seconds, that actually one area where PTI has not managed to establish its ground is Sindh interior. Sindh urban is a different story. Sindh interior is a very interesting case where PTI has not managed at all. And this calls for a study in itself, that why the youth in Sindh interior could not didn't get excited by by the message of PTI. And I'd insist that on Taliban support, but that's the discussion for another day. But very quickly to Zaid's point, the problem with the West, I mean, you raised an important point. The issue is that for an international community, how do you win? The first issue for them is how do you deal with Pakistan? And it's Pakistan's decision for the Pakistanis and Pakistan's institution, what kind of a government they have. Now, under the circumstances when it's not happening, a social contract is absent, the West can criticize, Western states have criticized. I mean, unlike China, Western states have said that, Pakistani institutions should be more responsive, but I don't think that anybody is ready to take that responsibility. There's already too much on the plates.
Okay, thank you. We've got 3 questions from members audience members online. I am first going to ask those present here. Anyone with questions? Okay, so we'll please wait for the microphone to come to you because this is being recorded. And if you can please keep your questions brief and direct, and if you mention who you are asking the question to, if not, you can ask a general question. If you want to start with this gentleman here, please, and then Zira. Yeah, just speak.
Hi, hello. Hi, I'm Zaid. I'm a social policy MSc candidate here at LSE. Since there's the discussion been about whether or not the PTI can capitalize on this moment in history, and Salman did talk about the strategies they have in terms of protesting and using street power to push back the military. My question pertains to the strategies that are under discussion, particularly Salman's position on whether or not it's effective, and maybe Aisha can chime in about the broader effectiveness. Leading up to 2008, the late Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif came together and collaborated, despite having a long history of opposition, to unseat and impeach the eventual Musharraf military dictatorship. In the status quo, there have been overtures by the PPP to try and talk to the PTI to work together potentially. Is this a strategy that has been considered in order to make use of this moment in history to de-seat the military, compared to the strategy that Salman did talk about, which is using protest and pressuring the military through the power of the street, right? That's my question.
Okay, question from Zira, please.
Hello, my question is for Salman Akram Raja. In 2018, Justice Shaukat Aziz Siddiqui was involved in an interview where he stated that General Faz is involved in bench fixing, and he was fired by the Supreme Judicial Council over misconduct and spreading misinformation. Now we see another letter, as you have mentioned, by 6 justices of the Islamabad High Court, saying that the people from the intelligence agencies are involved in fixing judicial judgments. So do you think a similar response from the Supreme Judicial Council that was seen in 2018, given that the current chair of the Supreme Judicial Council, Chief Justice Qazi Faiz Issa, is not very lenient towards groups associated with the Pakistan Tehreek Insaf?
Okay, thank you very much. We've got two questions, and Salman, you have to, if you wish to take on both, but I will add one more, which is along the same lines as these, as the second question from Zirak over here. And then you can answer all three, and then I shall give you a chance to answer all of them. And Zahid, you can come in on the question that the gentleman asked as well. The question online is from Shahmeen Rahman, and is, if Salman, I'm going to just read the question because I don't want to paraphrase someone else's words, okay? If Salman Raja Sahib believes that depriving PTI of its election symbol was part of the effort to disenfranchise the PTI, an act that the Supreme Court upheld by the Chief Justice Faiz Issa, then given that the IHC letter, this for the benefit of the audience, this is the letter that's being referred to from the last 2.5 hours ago, the IHC letter to the same Chief Justice, does he, that is Salman, expect any different outcomes? Salman, please speak now. Please keep your answers brief. Thank you.
Okay. Now, when I talked about, being out there on the roads, I did not necessarily mean that there would be disruptive street protests. At the outset, I think what we have in mind today is really democratic, peaceful protests, political meetings, maybe even in designated areas with court permission. So we do want to come out and raise our voice. So that, I think, is something that is completely legitimate and is legitimate mainstream politics. So I'm not talking about, disruptive street protests. Whether that happens at some point in the future or not, I'm not saying that's a current strategy. So that's one thing. Could we come together with another party, such as the People's Party, to do something from within the House, kind of impeachment that General Musharraf was subjected to? I don't see that as the way forward at the moment, for two reasons. Firstly, the power that we are facing is really de facto power. Musharraf, of course, had donned the de jure, as if it were, power of being a president who could be unseated through the National Assembly, through Parliament. There's nobody to unseat today. The power that we face is kind of behind the scenes, as if it were. So there's no legal way to undo the hybrid part of the compact that we are facing. So that has to go away through some political strategy. So impeaching and getting rid of the overbearing power that we face is not really a viable option at the moment. The idea that we could have somehow collaborated with the People's Party, again, it's been, something that people have talked about. I do not feel that there was any real opportunity to do that. What was done between the 8th and the 9th of February was not done to allow PTI to come back into office, if not power, through some deal with another political party. I do not see the system permitting that. So while there was some talk at a subsidiary kind of level, but I don't think that talk would have led to anything in terms of actually forming a government between, the People's Party as a partner. So I really don't see that as a realistic option. Now, what happened with Justice Shaukat Siddiqui actually has spurred today's letter. Today's letter expressly refers to Justice Shaukat Siddiqui's complaint and the fact that he was then removed by the Supreme Judicial Council for, quote unquote, making unverified accusations against the intelligence agencies. But that dismissal or removal has been overturned by the Supreme Court recently. And today's letter expressly says that it is emboldened by the fact that the Supreme Court has undone Justice Shaukat Siddiqui's dismissal, even though by now he's gone beyond the age of superannuation, so he won't come back as a judge. But the Supreme Court has said that his dismissal, because of the allegations that he made, was unfair, was unwarranted. And that is the context in which the accusations or the assertions made in the letter issued today have been made. So they're saying that, look, what Justice Siddiqui said is what we are saying. Now, you ask us for evidence. We are judges of the High Court. We decide matters of life and death every day. We are hereby making a statement. We are saying it, that this is what has happened. What other proof do you need? So with that, they've really opened up a conversation, and the immediate response from journalists and people close to the establishment has been that unless these 6 judges produce proof, they should be prosecuted and put in jail. So that is the question that has now been put before the Pakistani people. Are you going to give credence to what these 6 judges of the Islamabad High Court are saying? Or are you going to look the other way, ask them for proof, and let them kind of embrace whatever fate awaits them? So I think that's why today and what will follow is the most important juncture. We'll see how the academia, how the intelligentsia, how civil society, how political workers out there react to this moment. That will determine a great deal about our immediate politics and maybe beyond the immediate. The other question was about the role of the Supreme Court, potentially the fact that it is this Supreme Court or this Chief Justice who presided over the decision that took away the electoral symbol. Do we expect anything better to happen? Anything more, favorable to the PTI? I really would not want to prejudge the issue. I think now it's not just the PTI versus the establishment of the system. It is also a very significant part of the judiciary. One of the 5 high courts of the country has, in effect, called upon the Chief Justice and the leadership of the Supreme Court, the Supreme Judicial Council, to listen to what they're saying and to take action. So what action the Supreme Court will take will again determine the nature of our asymmetrical, social contract. Will it become slightly more symmetrical or not will depend on how the Supreme Court takes up the challenge that it's been thrown by the 6 judges of the Islamabad High Court. So I think it's a most, poignant moment. It's a moment pregnant with possibilities. I'm not going to prejudge any outcome right now.
Okay, thank you. Aisha, briefly.
This effectiveness of PTI protests, and this is the question. I think it's important for the PTI leadership in jail or outside jail to look at how they can provoke people. What is the strategy? Salman Raja is talking about peaceful discussions, border meetings, etc. But those alone, of course, are not going to kind of impress the military. On the other hand, what the military has done, and I think this is a part which I would like to highlight, is that since the last couple of years, the military chief, the new chief, has really kind of tried to tighten his control over the rank and file, which, by the way, is very supportive of Imran Khan. So what we have is now an Army Act with critical amendments to the Army Act, which make it even, things said by or any issue challenged by even retired military people and their families punishable. Not just that, they have come out with a new notification, which again which is classified, by the way, which is on social media behavior of military personnel and their families. You're not supposed to share anything, any discussion, you can't do forwards. So there is that gagging, complete gagging of any political discussion within the military. And with that, he is prepared to lash out on any kind of protest. And I think it's also important to note the kind of hybrid government that we have at the moment. This is a hybrid 3.0. It's worse than the earlier hybrids because in this case, it's not just that the political government, there is a political government which creates the policies. In fact, the political government cannot take certain decisions. The interior minister is the army chief's choice. The finance minister is his work. And critical positions in the state bureaucracy are now being controlled by the GHQ instead of by the political government. So this is what any political movement will be up against. So, how do you keep people excited? How do you tell people? And by the way, the backlash from May 9, the way the army went at, after PTI supporters to whip them with this May 9 thing, has left its mark. So people will be very, very careful, when they come out, what they come out for. Very quickly, 2006, I think it's a brilliant question and a very important one. Because if Pakistan has to step back towards democracy, this is where the answer is to be found. Political parties coming together. And what I mentioned, 2007-8, the military wanted political parties to become regionalized. I mean, it doesn't matter whether, what Salman said, that PTI could have been the National Party agreed. But the fact is the military want them regionalized. And this regionalization, the whole idea started with the Charter of Democracy in 2006. 2006, military became extremely fearful. What if these two, parties come together? They begin to cooperate. I mean, we had been in power, we had benefited in power because of, the constant, in fighting. Now, the problem here is, and the People's Party has reached out to the PTI. And in fact, one possibilities that people do talk about, and in fact, maybe Salman can clarify if that is a possibility or not, that in case PMLN government fails, then the other option would be PTI, PPP joining hands. I mean, you'd need a majority, to form a government. But the problem here is as follows, that PTI is controlled by one man. And how does one convince this one man to actually cooperate with these other parties? He's the one who's not talking. And so, even for skeptics of PTI, I mean, that argument should also be heard, that the problem is between a government trying to bring economic stability and between a party, a PTI and its leader who actually doesn't want to talk to anyone and will not be satisfied until he's the one back in power. It's not an ideal situation, but any move forward will require the three parties talking amongst themselves. And where I think, where I feel the problem lies, that none of the three parties, PMLN, PPP, PTI, they all have their failings in terms of creating the legal and constitutional formula to control the military. None have done it. When PTI was in power, they allowed the military chief, the army chief, to kind of, be as powerful as it could get. Meeting media people, meeting businessmen. Not only that, I mean, PTI actually got, it was under their government, they got the army chief in the Economic Advisory Council. The SIFC, which is the Special Investment Facilitation Council, which is supposed to do all strategic economic management, is now the second version. All parties, PPP, PMLN, PTI, all have failed in that. Can they come together to actually find a way, legal, constitutional, in fact, using the powers which the Constitution gives them to rope in the military?
Okay, thank you. We're not going to take any more questions, I'm afraid, because we're terribly out of time. And as I said at the very beginning, I'm very conscious that it's very, very late in Pakistan, but we'll go on, Salman, if it's fine, for just 5 more minutes, because we have quite a few questions from members of the audience. Zahid, very briefly.
Zaid, just responding to your, and I'll be very brief on that. Movements, right? Social movements. Basically, what we are witnessing in Pakistan is the need for a social movement that would, bring back democracy and uphold people's rights. But what is going on at the moment in Pakistan is that the cost of becoming part of movement has being raised significantly high. Now, Salman is sitting here, he's leading one of the movements, he's part of them. You can ask him that how difficult for him or how expensive it has become for him to become part of any social movement. Now, he's an advocate, right? But when we talk of local people who have got no job security, dealing with inflation, higher prices, cost of living, for them to be part of that movement is extremely difficult. And mind you, one more thing, in Pakistan history, you don't witness much organic social movements. One of the organic movement occurred back in late 1960s, and you knew what happened in 1971. After that, there was no organic movement. Even pre-partition, it was not the people on that side of the border that were part of those social movements. It was the people on the other side of the border. So it's probably one of those few moments in history, or maybe the first moment in our Pakistani history, then where we require an organic movement to actually make some meaningful change. So probably when we study movements, we look at the issue of collective action. And I think Aisha did point towards that there is an issue of collective action here as well, because then you need to, deal with other actors, political actors, which is not easy at this particular moment in time, because again, the issue of cost has been raised very, very high by the state here.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to take all the questions that have come in from members of the audience online. And please keep your answers brief so we can end quickly. Salman, this one is for you from Kashif Rana, and says, if a senior, you can keep your answers very briefly. I'll just tell you all the questions at one go if you make a note. If a senior advocate like you is unable to save people's mandate, how do we expect other candidates to get justice? What do you think is the way ahead? So part of this you've answered already, but there is a rhetorical element to this. This question is anonymous, and you will realize why. I'm going to read it from start to finish. It's kind of longish. It's not to any of you in particular. So Salman, you and Aisha, you can very, very briefly respond to it. I think one way of looking at these elections is that the plan was to malign the three pillars of democracy, and it has probably succeeded. Both the judiciary as well as the bureaucracy have run the election so badly and maligned themselves in trying to be the bogeyman of the military. Consequently, the parliament which has come into existence is one partly and is not representative of the masses. This has grave consequences for the governance in terms of the public trust in both the democratic process as well as the state pillars. Now, this benefits the military, which was losing its charm since 2010. It has now become, it as in the military, has now become the powerful driving agent of the governance. A good example of this is the Special Investment Facilitation Committee, which it is leading. How would the panel take it? Being from Balochistan, I can tell that we live in a country where electoral rights are sold for money to the highest bidders, subject to their oath of allegiance to the men in uniform. This is the reality of democracy in Pakistan. The next question is, Aisha, for you. Do you think that the PTI has learned any lessons from its past tenure, where they relied heavily on the military to even bring its own MNAs to the parliament? Are they waiting again for their turn to become the chosen one, or has their thought process changed? The next one, Aisha, is also for you. Oh no, it's the same question. Right. Now, finally, this is the last set of questions. The first question, these are two questions from Mr. Mahid Khan. The third question, Mr. Khan, I say this to you, which is your comment about Aisha. I will share that with Aisha separately, but for the sake of time, I will only read out your two questions. The first question, knowing what has been happening for 2 years, there's complete lawlessness. How do I feel confident that you will pull out something from this rigged elections? Salman, this is presumably to you. You just couldn't save your symbol to contest, let alone getting your mandate back is fairy tale. Knowing the fact that nobody else stole your election except for men in green khaki, so do you fancy taking them on? And we are almost on the verge of losing civilian trial case too. That's question one. Question two, following up, you can club it. I'm not bothered about you winning any case till November. I don't see how this is relevant. No, I don't think the second question, Mr. Khan, is relevant, so I'm not going to read it out. That's the end of the questions. Salman, I'm going to give you the first chance to reply.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree with both Zahid and Aisha that there is a great need to come together. All political actors, all political forces must come together on, a common minimum agenda, and that must include the integrity of the electoral process. So what we have at the moment is the PTI complaining that the last election, was stolen, and the two other major parties, the People's Party and the PMLN, defending this election, saying no, it was all it was fine. So I mean, there is a basic disconnect. We have to come to the conclusion. We have to accept reality. We have to accept that there is a problem for us to come together. So it's not just a question of not wanting to talk. That's completely incorrect. I've been meeting Mr. Imran Khan fairly regularly in jail as a lawyer acting on his behalf in various cases. So I know exactly what his thinking is. He's very willing to talk to anybody on issues of principle, not to form a government necessarily. So his position is very clear that the PTI is not looking to form a government, through some stratagem. What we are looking to do today is to uphold certain values and certain principles. And the foremost value there is the sanctity of the electoral process. So whoever wants to come to us on that, we will take far more steps than the steps that are taken in our direction to form a common front that works for the integrity of the electoral process. So it's completely incorrect to say that he does not wish to talk to anybody. Now, there was a question whether the PTI has learned anything from its past and what it's undergoing today. I can very confidently make the statement that there is no appetite, no desire within the PTI to come to office with the support of a non-democratic actor. There is a complete realization that any such assumption of office is merely that. It's assumption of office. It's never assumption of power. So the PTI now truly wishes to represent the people. And, in various statements made inside the jail in my presence, Mr. Imran Khan has addressed journalists who are allowed during the trials that are being conducted in jail to question him because of a petition that I, in fact, moved. So they're allowed, and he's stated, several times why and what happened in 2018 and his regret about a number of things. So there's clearly evolution within the PTI at various levels. So to say that the PTI is somehow stuck in the past would be a complete mischaracterization. Now, I'll quickly run through some of the other questions. I mean, there is obviously a sense of, of how do we get out of this bind? What do we do? How will the judicial system or the constitution allow us to breach through the wall that the de facto powers or the powers that be have put up? Now, that is not an easy question to answer. So we are looking towards the judiciary, we are looking towards civil society at large, we are looking towards the other political parties. I think there will have to be not just a consensus between the political actors, but society at large with respect to the nature of the social contract, and that contract has to be based on a democratic process. So that's the best that we can really do. And I think if we do that and stick to it consistently, you will see some of the de facto power that stands in our way, whittling away. There is no other way to do it. And, there will be social movements, there will have to be political movements, but there has to be a basic belief in the core values of constitutionalism and of democracy, of rights, of equality, of fair trial and due process. So the fear that has been instilled into the body politic, into the population at large, has to go. We have to get a state that allows some basic forms of expression to happen. For 6 weeks now, 8 weeks, we've had Twitter turned off in Pakistan, or X as we call it now. How do you justify that? So there's this fear of expression. There is the fear of the ordinary individual that is, that has permeated the system. So we have to take a stand against that fear in order to overcome the fear that has been instilled into our society. So that is where we are. There's no easy way forward. There is no single institution that we can rely on, whether it's the judiciary or any other institution. It will have to be a coming together of a large number of forces, actors, political, non-political, academic, professional, and it will have to be that kind of a consensus that pushes, as if it were, the envelope. And I think it is possible. I remain hopeful. That is why I am in active politics. I am a lawyer, as many people have pointed out, and was doing fairly well. The only reason I've jumped into the political fray is because I think that people like me coming into politics, into active politics, sends a signal out there. I've been arrested, more than, well, twice in the last 3 weeks. So you go out and you face consequences. You embrace the system that exists in order to be able to change it. So that is the spirit with which we are engaged in the process that we have in front of us. And it's going to take us where it will take us. I do not have a defined roadmap. I can't say this is what we'll do and that is when we will get to our destination. It's a process and we've jumped into that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha, very briefly, please.
There was this larger question, this was somebody from Balochistan, almost suggesting.
3 pillars of democracy.
Almost suggesting that perhaps the military wants to get back into power because they're maligning every institution. I don't think that they want to get into power because they are already enjoying a lot of power. This is very.
No, the question was not get back into power. It's just that the military has been losing its charm since 2010, and they're trying to reinstate that.
No, but I don't think they will continue to have an image problem. This is something. I think this is this election. What has happened now has been a major kind of a milestone as well, because military's image within itself has also been damaged. So, to answer that question. Now, getting back to has PTI learned an answer, has learned a lesson. I would like to believe what Salman Akhundzada says, but I also kind of read the media, and what I hear is Imran Khan saying that he's ready to talk to the military, but not to the politicians because they are corrupt and because they have come into power on the basis of a rigged election. Now, that is an issue, of course, but you still need to have a conversation. So the question is he thinking about talking to that political leadership? And then raises this other question that, again, military is also very much at the heart of this political problem that we have. That the question is, will the next general be soft enough to allow for its own image to open up the doors, but also in opening up the doors, say, if the expectation is in the next 2.5 years, we're going to have another elections, those who are sitting in the government would not be excited about that. So a real push has to come from the army. And if this push doesn't come, if the push comes, it means that the army chief is talking to somebody else, to the PTI, which will then create furor, amongst the political parties on the other side. So we're caught right in the middle. And I think the important question is that will, in that case, say the army chief retires in 2018, what will be the plan? Will the PTI then start getting people's voices together, getting people out on the streets to put the pressure? Ultimately that conversation has to happen, and that conversation, will it be including the other parties or excluding the other parties? I think that is critical, and will be a critical indicator whether PTI has learned a lesson or not. Very briefly, I think because Salman Akhundzada is mostly on, he's on the other side of the fence, not on this side of the fence. The problem is when people get normal people who are commenting, who are observers of Pakistan politics, and the kind of abuse we get from PTI supporters, PTI support base, irrespective. And I wish, and I feel that it's very important, part of duty of the leadership, inside jail or outside jail, to at least bring that civility amongst its support base. for me, when that starts, will be an indicator if PTI has learned a lesson.
Thank you very much. I'm
Very
afraid.
quick to that, if I may.
Okay,
You know,
Salman,
PTI
Salman, I'm trying to finish this because it's late for you, not because it's late for us.
Just one sentence.
Yeah,
I just
go
want to
on.
say, PTI is a very large party. It's a very large tent, and all kinds of people exist in it. And it's not possible to, refine everybody's reactions and responses. So I'm very confident that there is never really a coordinated, centralized campaign of, hate or vitriol. It happens. I clearly see that happening. And within the party, ever since I've been there, we do raise a voice against that. I raised a voice against how a woman MPA was treated in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa assembly. So that conversation, I assure you, takes place within the PTI, and I think it will have an impact that will become more and more visible as we go forward.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm very aware it's 1 o'clock in the morning in Pakistan. Thank you especially to our online audience who have joined us from across time zones. Salman Raja, thank you very, very much for your participation. Aisha Siddiqa, thank you very much for yours. On behalf of Zahid and myself, on behalf of the Department of Social Policy and the LSE South Asia Center, a very big thank you to the audience over here. And we look forward to having more such discussions in future. And personally, we wish the best for Pakistan in the years ahead. Thank you and good evening.